the Joe Montana of triathlon. In my opinion, he is the best triathlete of all time. And there's an exit from the river just about 150 meters that way. Kim has a look on her face right now.
I'm
she
devastated
just found
right
out
now.
there's no Santa Claus. What's up, Trainiacs? Today, there are some very big things happening. What's up, Trainiacs? Today, there are some very big things happening. Maybe calls for a little bit of a history lesson to understand how big and important this podcast that I'm doing later today is. I'm doing it with Mark Allen. I'll tell you straight out, he is like the Wayne Gretzky, the Michael Jordan, the Pele, the Joe Montana of triathlon. In my opinion, he is the best triathlete of all time. And he was a part of what I think, and what a lot of people think, is the best triathlon of all time. Like single best one-day race. And if you haven't heard of it, this is the Iron War that happened in 1989 between Mark Allen and Dave Scott. For 6 years, Dave Scott, the man, was going into Kona, and basically it was his biggest race of the year. He would get beat up throughout the course of the year, be injured, but he would always show up in Kona, ready to race, and he would win every time. At the same time, Mark Allen, his nemesis, would come in, and for the life of him, even though he was basically going undefeated throughout the rest of the season, for years on end, he could not beat Dave Scott in that race. So coming into the Ironman World Championship in Kona in 1989, you again had Dave Scott, Midwest, hardworking, defending champion, tough as nails dude, going after probably the fittest, most natural triathlete ever to have walked the earth, Mark Allen, ready to clash again. What ended up happening is the gun went off and they swam. Dave and Mark were excellent swimmers. Mark was a former All-American swimmer, and he stayed on Dave Scott's toes the entire race, got out of the water together. They go out on the bike and they race 112 miles together. And they came off the bike, literally, again, together, went through transition together. And then when they got out onto the run, Dave Scott said, you know what? I gotta dump this guy. And they brought the pace down to like 5-minute miles. And as soon as Dave Scott would bring up the pace, Mark Allen would answer. And as soon as Mark Allen would bring up the pace, Dave Scott would answer. And they're calling back, and Mike Riley, who is also on the podcast, the voice of Iron Man, you are an Iron Man, that guy, he said that he's back in the tower, and they're calling in saying they're down to 5-10 miles. And he's going, what? That's gotta be insane. That's not right. But no, it was right. They were pushing each other so hard, so fast, that both of them were thinking, this is insane. We can't keep up this pace. But they kept going shoulder to shoulder, and they were literally, as Mark Allen describes it, bumping into each other because they were going so hard and they were so close that they couldn't control themselves. Then, with about 3 or 4 miles left, they're still together, having raced 7 hours and 40 minutes side by side. There was a hill coming into the town of Kona, and at the bottom of the hill, there was an aid station. Mark Allen says, you know what? At the top of the hill, I'm gonna go. And at that moment, Dave Scott reaches over to grab a water, Gatorade or something like that, and something in Mark's head said, go. And he hammered it and lost Dave. And for the first time in the entire day, Dave did not have an answer for him. For the first time in their entire career, Dave did not have an answer. Mark Allen ended up winning.
To beat Dave Scott on what ended up being his absolute best day of his career, was really something special. It was the passing of the title from the best in the sport to my career, really.
Competitive element of that race couldn't have been any better. It was a perfect race for competition. It was a perfect race to exploit our talents. And that day, his talent was just a little bit better.
And still to this day, that marathon that they did, officially, it's not the fastest marathon ever ran in Kona, but back when their time was calculated, their marathon time included the transition. It took until last year for Patrick Lang to actually beat that time, but it didn't include the transition. So in my opinion, Those two dudes, almost 30 years later, still have the Ironman Kona marathon record. And it's a real testament to like how badass they were, that 30 years of science and nutrition and training and tech later, that is still the guttiest race ever. Now, the way that I told that, I'm sure it does not do it justice. If you are at all interested in triathlon, which like all of you are, is you need to go read The Iron War. This book is so fantastic that I think I read it in a day and a half. Kim doesn't do triathlon, hasn't ever read a triathlon book. She read it in the course of about 3 days. It's so fantastic. It talks about the emotion and like the self-will required, not just for these guys to do triathlons and do well, but for everyone in triathlons to do well. It talks about the science of training and the different methods of training. And basically the biggest thing about it is it's not about the gear you have or the suit you have or the race you're doing. It's about what you got in here and up here. So I'll put a link in the description below to where you can go and buy that book on Amazon. If there is one triathlon book that you ever read, it should be that one. As always, if you did click through that link and buy anything within the 24 hours after clicking through that link, doesn't cost you anything extra, but it helps us out because we get a small commission. So much appreciated. And yeah, Mark Allen does not grant a ton of interviews, and we're interviewing him. This is big stuff. This is big stuff. In other not so big stuff news, I have the morning swim in the Red River just dialed in. So nice this morning. So I have a pretty sweet setup here figured out now that I know that I can swim in that river. I park here, and there's an exit from the river just about 150 meters that way. Then I take my bike, I go down as far as I want to swim. I lock up my bike, I swim. I come back. Hoob. Massive rip in this just from sitting on a hanger all winter. That's not normal. So I swim down as far as I want to go. I hop out, I go to work, I shower. It's awesome. Getting your training done doesn't always have to be a ginormous production. As long as you're willing to suffer a little bit of ridicule from the entire city about working out, swimming, and biking and running where people normally don't. But besides that, totally enjoyable. Here, I'll give you some context of how convenient this is. Headquarters is right over there. Huh? It's pretty nice. Stick with me, folks. You'll go a long way. Who's excited for Mark Allen though? I want to know what was going through your head in between that 1982, 1989 where you were so dominant.
We obviously, we've already now gotten into a bit of the Iron War, so we may as well just continue there. Taren assigned me the book as reading,
it was
my reading
assigned
assignment.
Reading, yeah. If you want to be on this podcast, Kim, you've got to read the book.
So I read the book, and it was really fascinating. Do you feel it was an accurate depiction of everything that happened at that time?
To be honest, no. Actually, Dave, Scott, and I had a lawsuit filed against the author and the publisher because so much of what was in there had been basically fabricated or interpreted by the author's mind, I guess. He never did one interview with us. He never asked us one question. He put it all together kind of in a sensationalized fashion. We settled out of court and went our own ways, but
Kim has a look on her face right now.
I'm
she
devastated
just found
right
out
now.
there's no Santa Claus.
I don't even know what to ask you anymore. Everything I know is untrue. Well, because you did go into a lot of things from, as far back as your childhood, your relationship with your father, all these kind of things, the mental challenges that you had as far as breaking through some of those self-imposed barriers. So, I mean, I guess I have to ask you, is any of that true then?
Not really. My main purpose and goal for racing was not to overcome anything.
I did have one more Iron War question for you, Mark, and that was the fact that you clearly didn't have a mustache when everybody else seemed to have a mustache in all of the footage. You could edit that last little part in about saying Wayne Gretzky
Wayne Gretzky
of triathlon.
of triathlon. Michael Jordan of triathlon. That was awesome. Big fan. Maybe
Bigger fan.
Bigger fan. Yeah. Trainiacs, if we're spitting heat in these podcasts. Go to triathlontaren.com/podcast info if you want to be notified of when these are out. We just had the grip. Mark Allen. That was the best. All right, guys.
Go outside
You're free.
so you don't poo on the floor.